The bathroom of your dreams is only a phone call away with BCI Bath and Shower. We can make your ordinary bath and shower extraordinary. This is not a cookie-cutter design. This is a complete custom build that will fit your every need. It's never been easier or more affordable than right now to get the bathroom of your dreams. We have the best monthly programs in the industry with payments as low as $99 per month or no payments, no interest for 18 months with approved credit. The hardest part of your new bathroom is gutting and building the tub and shower. If your bathing area is old, there could be damage behind the walls and possible mold and mildew, which can be a serious safety issue. At BCI, we don't cover a problem, we fix it. Call now to get a never clean glass treated door with a no-track system at half off for the first 50 callers. Factory trained, certified installers made in the USA and discounts for seniors and military. Call 800-755-0466. That's 800-755-0466.
Welcome to the Turnpike Sports Spotlight. Dave Weishuttle with you. Anyone who's a fan of sports or just watches the news nowadays has heard the term name, image, and likeness deals, or NILs. They have become a hot topic in the sports world where students and amateur athletes can actually get paid because of the sports they play. I can tell you as a lawyer, it's a brand new area of law you have to get to know, not only for drafting the contracts, but for understanding the implications of these contracts. And some of the things you have to know about are money management and tax implications of these deals. Luckily, we have a returning guest who knows all about NILs. He is accountant Miklos Ringbauer, who is the founder of the accounting firm MiklosCPA out of Los Angeles, and he is on the line with us right now. Miklos, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me back. Good to talk to you again.
Oh, it's great talking to you again. And this is such a big topic. Like I said, you can't turn on the news or follow sports without hearing the term name, image, and likeness. Now, just to get everyone on the same page, when we talk about NIL deals, what are we talking about? I mean, what is it that the student athlete is signing up for, and what are their duties under an NIL deal?
Of course. So it's a brand new area, as you mentioned. And who said accounting and tax laws are boring?
Right.
A couple of years ago, Judge Gorsuch had delivered a historic perspective on this matter about the NCAA, where that item and changing the laws for NCAA was in 2021, where the athletes had no benefits from their name, image, or likeness that they were being used for promoting the college sport or any of their other side opportunities that they may were able to get as a sponsorship or as endorsement purposes. So that was a big shift for the students and college athletes, where now they have the ability to earn income out of these activities, utilize their success in their sport.
Under the current laws or regulations, I mean, are there any businesses that can't enter into an NIL deal? I mean, for example, can a casino or a sports book or a cannabis company create an NIL deal with a student athlete, or does it depend on the state in which the contract is performed under?
Oh, we are jumping into the deep waters.
Yeah,
yes.
Right. Let's go right into the deep end here, right?
The rules are generally set by the states, and most states prohibit certain activities, exactly the ones that you mentioned.
Okay. All right.
Unfortunately, there are the state legislatures that are currently making the rules because there's no federal legislation on this matter. Mm-hmm. So that's very important. Even though that it was a federal court case, the states were left to make their own decision in this process. With most states, they have a variety of rules where sometimes they defer it back to the college or the university that the athlete is a student, as well as performing their duties as fantastic sports on the field. But most colleges will determine that they don't want to be associated with some industries or some segments. And so therefore, when the athlete signs the agreement, there are those stipulations that they cannot be participating, like an alcohol or a tobacco or, for example, gambling as well matters.
Now, we mentioned state and federal, so you're an accountant, and whenever we talk about taxes, we're either talking about federal income tax or state income tax. When we're dealing with NILs, do they basically fall under state income tax, or are there federal income tax concerns that have to be addressed when these kind of deals are in place?
So the answer is a little bit of both.
Okay.
NIL itself deals with state matters, but as any person in the U.S. is subject to federal income taxes, so any earnings that a student athlete will get from endorsements or from royalty payments as a result, they will be subject on the federal income tax level, as anybody else would be performing a self-employment. And this is the most important piece of this. College students, in this case, are treated as self-employed individuals. They are running their own little businesses in the process, and not employees for NIL deal purposes. And then, of course, the state rules, we have 50 states. Not every state has enacted rules currently with respect to some items. So, for example, in California, NIL rights also go all the way down to community college level versus other states where they don't have college level or high school level type of NIL deals. And then based on the state income taxation for that athlete, it will be subject to the local rate, whether it's Nevada where there is none, or where it's California where you can get up to all the way to 13% income tax bracket.
Oh, okay.
One unique part on it is very important, and a lot of the athletes will forget. It also matters where the service is also being performed.
Okay.
So, for example, if I'm a California student and I end up going for a photo shoot to New York, guess what? Welcome to New York tax laws.
Yep.
And subject to local taxation on that level.
I got to tell you, anytime you're on, I take so many notes because as a lawyer, I run into the issues that you bring up, and it's so great to hear your take on this and an accountant's view of this. I know one of the questions, and you answered it for me, what kind of contracts are being created. You said the student athlete is creating their own business. And I'm curious, if a student athlete is offered an NIL deal, is there a particular business entity that would benefit them in terms of tax liability? I mean, for example, if quarterback John Smith was offered an NIL deal, will that student be better off if he signed the contract as a corporation? I mean, for example, John Smith LLC, would that be better tax-wise for him? Would that benefit the student in terms of taxes, or does it depend on which state the contract falls under?
As an accountant answer that nobody likes, it depends.
Hey, lawyers give that too, though. So it's part. That's the situation we're in. It's state and federal, and different states have different rules, and you have to deal with it.
Yes. So my answer to this one is twofold. First and foremost, the NIL agreements has to be approved by the school as well. So the student athlete cannot just write a contract and not have been approved by the school within the state jurisdictional rights. So that's the very first important piece that they need to watch out for. Once that is done, if the athlete is looking to become pro or anything else in the future, it may worth to start the business process of their activities under their corporation.
Okay.
And make sure that they are establishing themselves and building their own brand in that environment. And, having it, maybe too soon at the very first or second year, but as they grow and as the deals become more important and more valuable because their career are also going upward trajectory wise, it may worth to be accepting the higher cost of operation. Because remember, if you are incorporated, there are specific rules and requirements that the incorporated entity is subject to, either as a local franchise tax payments, no matter whether you make money or not, or even filing requirements versus being unincorporated as a self-employed.
Well, you mentioned filing requirements. What are the documents that are generally part of an NIL contract? What are the tax forms that people should know about, whether you're a student athlete or you're a business involved in an NIL deal? What are the tax forms that are generally a part of this business model?
So the student athlete very important that they do a proper tax planning and they understand the consequences, where they will be performing those services, what type of payment they will get, whether it's endorsement and being there on the spot signing autographs, for example, that would be subject to self-employment taxes.
Okay.
And they get a 1099 NEC for it. However, if they later on the contract, for example, specifies that they will get royalty payment because of the images being used for something else purposes and, from that vendor or that promoter side, then they will get a different type of tax from, for example, on the royalties and payment, a 1099 MISC form for that service. But generally speaking, whether it would be a business as an incorporated or whether it would be an individual, they should be prepared to provide a W-9 for the contract purposes and have those provided whoever is paying them. And once the payment is done, of course, student athletes now have promoters, they have managers, and all of those other fun stuff as pro players have. And so, you have associated expenses that those will become deductible against your income. So that's the beauty of it. It's not a wage income. It's a self-employment or royalty type of income that you can set expenses against.
Generally, what is taxable income under the NILs? I mean, you mentioned signing autographs. You mentioned, endorsement deals. Is there a plateau a student athlete has to reach when income tax kicks in, or it depends on really the state where you're working under the contract? Or what is taxable income, just as so everyone knows what taxable income is under an NIL deal?
Of course. So welcome to the U.S. taxation of your worldwide income. Any and all item that a college athlete receives is a taxable income, whether they got cryptocurrencies, whether they got a swag bag, whether they got a car.
Oh, okay.
So it doesn't have to be cash compensation for the services that they are performing. Any and all items, even let's say paying for your travel tickets to go and attend the event, hotel lodging potentially would be also as part of their compensation if it is paid by whoever is engaging the student athlete. So the payment form does not matter. Everything will be a taxable income. Even if they post it on their social media, any of those marketing payment would be subject to income taxes as a result. So that is the base level. Now the question becomes how much money the athlete makes. The federal rule-wise, if a self-employed individual makes less than $400, it will not be subject to self-employment income taxes. But anything over $400 will be included as not only income tax, but subject to Social Security and Medicare taxes on the federal level. And on the state level, depending on which state the student lives in or subject to tax residency, they may or may not tax it, because we have some states in our great nation where they are not having any state income taxes for individuals.
Listening to you, I realized how important it is to have a good financial plan once the NIL is executed. I mean, what are the most important things a student athlete needs to know about managing their money under the contract?
All of the student athletes should always consult and interact with their attorney, with their accountant and the financial advisor. So they understand how the money is going to be used, spent, or earned from, and they account for it, especially that we are subject to estimated tax payments on our earnings if we are self-employed, both federal and state level, so that the athlete knows that if I made $100,000 minus a couple of dollar expenses, that will be all subject to income taxes. So make sure that you have some money set aside for Uncle Sam.
Well, it's so incredible, these deals and what they've turned into, and especially the money management side of, this whole equation. Is there anything right off the bat when NIL deals are executed, what should everyone do with regard to the contract? I mean, do they set up a budget for themselves? Do they form new bank accounts for the NIL money just to keep track of it? What are some of the basic things that all student athletes need to do once they sign an NIL deal?
Very first thing I'd recommend to our clients as well, it doesn't have to be student athlete, but any self-employed activity, is that you have some financial literacy courses. Understand your responsibilities, understand how as a business you operate, because you are technically at this point a business.
Yeah.
Except not selling widgets, but you're selling your expertise as an athlete and receiving those endorsements as a result. That would be the very first one. And then, as you mentioned, setting up separate bank account. If you are incorporated, you have to make sure that the business has its own separate account and you don't pierce the corporate veil.
Yeah.
That's one of the most important aspects. Any of your listeners who have heard that term, that's a dreaded term.
Yeah, Google it. Google it. You'll have a whole lot of quotes from attorneys and accountants about piercing the corporate veil.
So yes, but even if you do not incorporate, it's a prudent practice to set up a separate account and pay the bills and associated expenses with it and receive that money into that account. One of the challenges that we have seen for our athlete and entertainer clients is they commingle. And they use the Venmo. They just provide that Zelle account and it's personal at the same time, and untangle it. It's a lot of fun.
Oh, it's a mess. It's an absolute mess. But one thing I got to ask you about, and you touch on it a little bit, is, whenever we talk about taxes, the one thing I want to know is about deductions for those taxes. What are the expenses that can be deducted when there's an NIL in place? I mean, whenever we talk about student athletes, we're usually talking about people who are attending an educational facility. I mean, does the cost of books and meals and the expenses that go along with attending a school come into play when we're talking about deductions?
Not for this NIL-related activity.
Okay.
So the whole NIL for the taxation side came into place because somebody is an athlete and they are benefiting from their performance and the related school where they are attending. So most schools have signed agreements with their athletes, had code of conduct and all of those different things because they are representing the school sports activities, whether it's a tennis or a soccer or a football or a swim team type of activity. And they are professional athletes in that sense for the school because they are competing on behalf of the school. Now, what you mentioned, those school expenses such as books and tuitions and so forth. The students, athletes, most of them do have some kind of scholarship, so most of that expense would be covered. Therefore, it's non-deductible as an expense because it's already paid by the scholarship side. When it comes to educational expenses, those education expenses while they are in school are non-deductible as a business expense under the NIL segment because they are attending college just like any other students would be, except they are athletes and they are receiving these NIL deals. However, if they are attending some certification class for or continuing education type of activity for themselves to better their business activities, now that can be potentially a deductible item. How to manage your money when you are running your business. Some of them are free, some of them you have to pay for it. And those would be related expenses for operating a business. Running your NIL business is no different than running any other type of business. Except this time you're not selling a widget. You're selling your name, image, and likeness.
Well, let me ask you about that. When we talk about business expenses under an NIL deal in terms of tax deductions, what do they entail? I mean, we were talking off air. I'm an attorney licensed in New York. You're an accountant in Los Angeles, and New York and California are big states for NILs. And if I'm an attorney and I negotiate an NIL deal, and I tell my client, hey, you know what? You're going to need an accountant to do your taxes and manage your finances. You need to talk to Miklos Ringbauer in LA and have him work with you. Now, would my fee and your fee be considered a business expense under the NIL deal? And will that be part of a deduction? If they hire a marketing person, would that be a deduction on their taxes? What would be considered a legitimate business expense for tax purposes?
So the good news, you as a lawyer, your fee will be deductible because you are negotiating the contract.
By the way, I will be sending people to you. So if I get into this, I'm going to be sending people to you.
Thank you so much for that. However, on the account, so any and all necessary ordinary business expenses, I know it's vague, I'll get into it in a little bit more, are deductible to manage and better the business activity. So the federal or state governments, tax agencies understand that different businesses have different type of expense needs. For example, as you mentioned, the marketing agent or a promoter fees, commissions for them, or paying a business manager. Those are all deductible expenses because it is a result of that activity that they supported. Now, when it comes to your good old-fashioned accountant, the answer is it depends. If you are performing the services for the business, that's a business deductible. However, if the accountant is preparing your regular 1040 return, unfortunately, it's no longer deductible on the federal level.
Interesting.
It used to be part of your Schedule A deduction, but it's not a business deduction expense. So any good accountant will understand what and how they need to split their expenses to the client for accounting purposes, and then there will be some portion will be deductible and some portion will not be a business expense for them.
You know, one thing we're starting to hear a lot about when it comes to NIL deals are the NIL collectives. These are entities where people pay into a collective and the NILs are paid out of these collectives, which are usually 501c3 entities, which are legal charities for people out there listening. It seems like a lot more of these collectives are utilized more and more. What are the tax ramifications if an NIL deal includes one of these collectives and monies are paid out to a person from these collectives, which are really charities under the law?
So, for example, Arkansas rule HB 1671 was requiring 501c3s to set up for the athletes as a collective. The answer is the collective is supposed to benefit and help to protect the student athletes. After all, they are just starting out their careers, starting out their activities as a professional eventually, and hopefully they will turn all into pro in their activity-wise in the sport field that they selected. However, once they receive the money from the charity, that is an income for them. It just happens to be that it's an aggregated item, and that organization will be paying out some kind of sharing of income based on whatever the rules are for the state. Every state has a little bit different rules. So there are 28 states currently who have NIL rules set up, and each state have different specs to it. Not every state will have the 501c3s.
I got to ask you a question that someone asked me. So I knew you were coming on. So I said, I'm going to ask Miklos this. Does the tax situation for an NIL get more complicated if the student athlete isn't 18 years old yet? I mean, if a parent or a guardian has to co-sign the agreement because the student athlete isn't old enough yet, how does that affect the filing of the taxes based on the deal? I mean, does the parent or guardian have to file taxes based on the NIL agreement?
Oh boy. Welcome to the fun part. This is where it becomes very, very complicated.
See, that's why I'm shoving it off on you, so I don't have to answer it.
Thank you for the opportunity to answer. Depending on the state. So some states specifically prohibit student athletes who are not in college level to benefit from NILs. Very, very important. But like great state of California, there's a specific caveat, a specific rule segment that student athletes who are in high school level have the ability to earn, but it's not under the NIL side, but under a different tax code segment and the rule segment. So it is completely up to the state. The NIL mainly deals with college athletes who are 18 years and older. But anybody who is below, it is based on the state rules that the state has enacted. And some states do prohibit earning and income from high school athlete level under the likeness, image, and or name segment.
I got to tell you, this is like a fascinating area of law. And as I said, the rules and regulations dealing with NILs are constantly changing. I know Virginia just recently allowed schools to directly pay athletes for their publicity rights. So, like I said, this area of the law is constantly evolving. As an accountant, where do you think the rules and regulations regarding NIL deals are headed? I mean, what are you anticipating will be the next step in NILs?
Well, I wish I could tell the future, but I believe that people should receive compensation for their activities. whether it's performing on a field in a sense that they will be utilizing their image and likeness or their name for they are getting promoted on the school level. I think there will be a lot of controversial tax court cases, especially when it comes to how the income is earned and from where it is sourced from, which state and how it is being earned. But it will become more complex, and probably at some point we will more align to the general professional athletes and entertainers, which they already had these type of deals and agreements. But this whole NIL became an important aspect because student athletes never were able to get compensated for their image that being used and to promote for sport events and so forth. I think it's going to be state rules that will drive the majority of the discussion and how well state legislators will write these agreements. Most of the state rules says that sometimes the school will make the choice what will be accepted and what will not be accepted. And for example, there are some states, some of the southern states that already reversed or sunsetted their NIL rules because the schools have created their own boundaries that they accept student athletes to be able to perform under the NIL segment. So it will be a very, very interesting future aspect and will be state by state basis. And some states will have very hard regulations and hard to follow regulations as a result. And many states will have eventually, once the school figure it out, how and what they accept and how they will comply with the NIL rules. Because many cases the state legislature just defer that, school and your athletes can figure out what the rules will be and what is acceptable and what is not. Once that gets cleared out, probably these rules, many of them will go away or sunset because the schools will have a good handle on it.
Miklos, we're running out of time, but if people want to reach out to you, how do they get in contact with you? And do you have a website for your accounting firm, MiklosCPA?
Yes, we have a website, MiklosCPA.com, and our number is 213-283-9002. I'm happy to help anybody who is interested learning more or they are already in the NIL environment.
Miklos Ringbauer, founder of MiklosCPA, thank you so much for coming on and talking about taxes and NIL deals. I always say people should consult a professional when it comes to their taxes, especially when it deals with new and evolving ways to earn income like NIL deals. Thanks for coming on and giving us some incredibly useful information.
Thank you for having me. Have a great rest of the day.
That'll do it for us this week. We'll see you next time on The Turnpike.